Hey folks, on this episode of The Prior Transformation, it's a bit of a deviation from the typical format. I sit down and interview a friend of mine named Chelsea Kentz, who's a wonderful entrepreneur that bootstrapped a company called Scratch a few years ago. And she'll tell you more about that, I'm sure, during the podcast. But we talk about entrepreneurship and reality and life and a lot of great things. So it's a really great conversation. I just want to let you know that the intro is kind of abrupt. There really is no intro on this one. It's because when we sat down, I started the mic, and that's typically what I do. And I started recording, and the conversation just got really good. So rather than chopping that off and trying to rearrange and do kind of weird things, I decided to kind of just drop that in raw and unedited. So hope you guys enjoyed. Welcome to the Prior Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Smoots. In this podcast, we explore, actually, there's no we, it's just I. I'm the only person here. And really, I just ramble for 2 or 3 minutes on a technology or business topic. And occasionally, I'll interview some smart folks. If you like that kind of thing, enjoy. Company-wise, so right now, so you're not doing Scratch anymore, right?
No, I just sold Scratch, so kind of in between. I'm in that in-between state that nobody wants to talk about, or nobody wants to label. I just had a conversation recently about that, where it's, you're more available for new opportunities and you're more fresh even. Like when you're in that in-between state, you're like getting ready to do something new, but anytime you express that to someone, it's almost like, oh, do you need something? Do you want something? Versus I can offer a lot, right?
Yeah. So what do you like? What are you interested in doing? Like, we talked about some stuff that you were doing before, but
yeah.
Is there any
next
particular project that you're interested in?
What I'm giving myself space for now is kind of like readjusting and rethinking the way that I'm approaching everything. So with Scratch, what I did, and we talked a little bit about it, but with Scratch, what I did was focus on this big end goal. Like I have to convert this company into this $1 billion exit. I need to raise money. I need to head in this direction. That was the idea of any successful company that I had in my mind, was that venture capital, sell for $1 billion plus is the way that you make a successful company.
So many.
Right. So when I started Scratch, I started it because I could start it with my own resources and I could bootstrap it. And that was important to me to learn, from the ground up how to build a business. And what I learned with Scratch was how to build a small business and how to actually understand like making profit and building something that could sustain itself without funding up front.
Profitable business in this day and age?
Right.
E-commerce? Wow. Revolutionary.
Trying to get to that space first. And what I learned through going through this process and as I've been working, in the last 7 years or so with other companies, I've worked with a lot of different startups, like from the, one of the first employees kind of helping grow. That's what I was doing with Launchpad when I was there with some of the companies that were there. Mm-hmm. And what I was learning from those experiences is just essentially, if you start out with all this money and you have your perspective of this big goal that you're supposed to get to, sometimes you miss like the opportunity of like real businesses in the middle, because in order to be successful, you have to hit these future thoughts of, how do we get to this market size? And instead of solving maybe for smaller markets that really need solutions, in that meantime. So what was Scratch?
Just so people kind of understand.
Yeah. So Scratch was as a cosmetics company for specifically nail art as a starting point. And so we collaborated with artists every month to design different nail wraps, which essentially are like a sticker that you put on your nail, but they're made out of nail polish. And so I had a subscription box that I did that was successful at scale. And that was like essentially a monthly DIY Manny box. That's what we called it.
Manny box.
Yeah, the Scratch Manny. Monthly Manny box.
The monthly Manny box.
Yeah.
And then you sold it. What made you want to sell it and move on to the next thing? Was it an offer you couldn't refuse? Was it just
no?
one? Yeah.
You know, I went through a few offers that I couldn't refuse that I decided to refuse. You know, there were two offers that were kind of on the table that were for a lot more money, but also heading me kind of in a direction I didn't necessarily want to go. I wanted, essentially, the most important thing for me at that time was that it could live on in the right way, and that I would have enough time and freedom to start working and thinking on what do I want to do next. You know, I initially was attracted to starting Scratch for business reasons of, okay, here's an opportunity. I'm not, you know, I've never been super into beauty itself. And so I realized where this small business belongs is in the hands of someone that's in love with, you know, the beauty industry, and someone that's in love with nail art. And that person was who I ended up selling it to. So for that deal wasn't nearly as much money as if I would have gone to one of the bigger deals, but I would have been staying, you know, essentially like an acqui-hire too, staying in that industry for a lot longer.
So the company like lives on basically,
right?
Through, and it was an employee. I think it's what you told me.
She's someone that worked with us. She's a nail artist that lives in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
She designed some of our most popular nail wraps for us, and so I knew like her heart was in the right place, and she's in the industry. And if it was going to go to anybody that would take it forward in the right way, I figured it's her.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So why entrepreneurship? You know, why not get a job at Raytheon or IBM or one of the big companies and be comfortable and that kind of thing?
Because that's not comfortable. That's the opposite of comfortable for me.
Okay.
And I'm sure it is for most entrepreneurs, which is the whole reason why we keep doing this to ourselves. Because it definitely makes sense to just, you know, I'll just get a job, get paid really well, and just go perform your tasks, duties, and go home, right? But for me, the drive is never in money, which is, for me, the drive has always been in the way that I spend my day and my time. So time to me is the most valuable thing. And yeah, I've enjoyed working with, you know, in the past I've worked at different studios and I've worked with different startups that I've enjoyed, you know, working with. But there's something about continuously being challenged and having something you've never seen that you have to solve being put in your face. And often I find, you know, a nice, comfy, full-time job doesn't really allow as many challenges because you essentially just have to perform really well in one spot. And for me, that's just, like, I can't do it every day. The same thing.
So how did you come to this realization about time? I think it's really interesting. Maybe we'll kind of pull that thread a little bit just to get a feel for how you think about time and how that's really valuable to you. Because I think a lot of people undervalue their time. You know, they think, you know, maybe I'll just do something myself, or they'll think, you know, oh, I can, you know, do stuff on the nights and weekends or whatever.
Right.
What made you think this way?
Too burned out when in the reality, what it comes down to is, oh yeah, I can just do nights or weekends, and you burn out pretty quick. So time to me has always been something that I think that is way, way more valuable than money. And obviously the best case scenario is the highest ratio money for the least amount of time in anything that you're working on, so that you have time to do everything that you're, you know, wanting to do. But essentially the way that I came to this for myself is in recognizing death, as silly as that sounds or as serious as that sounds, like understanding that I am not sure how long I'm going to live, and none of us really are. And so while I'm participating here for as long as I get to, what do I want to feel the most in my life? And the feeling that I want to feel the most is challenged, happy. I want to be around people that I love. And for me time is a huge part of accomplishing those things. If I'm saying I'm just going to go do this for this amount of time and then I have my weekends or I have my nights, even though I'm not enjoying what I'm doing presently, that to me is not a good enough ratio. The money is not worth it to me, if that makes sense.
Okay. And then was there something that happened in your life that made you think this, or was this just, an epiphany that you came on, or how did you figure this out? Because I think it's something that is almost counterintuitive. I think most people don't think about it this way at all.
Yeah. I think it's in huge part just the way that I was raised and then the experiences that I've had throughout life. Like most things that we come to, it's a collection of all of our experience, right? So I was raised in a family. My father had 2 businesses. So I was raised in a family that was focused around self-employment. So my father had and mother had an ice cream parlor and a movie theater. And so I worked from age 8 or so with them. I'd clean up theater after everybody was out from a movie, and I'd pour sodas, and that was the first job that I did. And I was on a stool pouring sodas, and my dad actually made it fun. The environment was always fun, and he always enjoyed the work that he did, and he was passionate about his businesses, and I saw that as his happiness. And when I went to school and kind of started to explore what is it that I'm interested in doing, my mom and my dad have always they've always pushed me towards, well, what makes you the happiest? What are you how will you enjoy your life the most? And my mom has always been a big traveler too, so she always pushed me to travel, to explore that way. And so halfway through college I moved to Germany for a year. And I traveled pretty much every chance I could. I worked at a hotel, and then I traveled while I was there. And the experiences that I had and some of the trips that I made just kind of gave me an appreciation for time, because here's this ratio of, if I work this much, then I can take these many days off and enjoy this. And then I think I just realized that if I'm just doing the things that I enjoy doing the most every day, that can be considered work and you can make money from that. And B, then it's like you're never, working a day in your life, that saying,
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's awesome. And you said, your dad was very passionate about his business, right? For you, where does passion come from? Like when it comes to business, is do you have like a certain few things that you're really passionate about and you pursue, or do you have an idea and you get deeply invested in that, or how does that work within?
Yeah, I've heard so much from so many people that don't start a business unless you're really passionate about that business or the idea or the space, and I've never been that passionate about any specific thing, which totally makes me feel like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be making a business in any industry. But then I realized where my real passions are is just literally in the creation, the idea, whatever it is, in almost any industry, the idea, solving it. So actually, treating it like it's like a formula, something that I need to solve and create, and then executing it. So it's almost like the harder the challenge or the industry is further away from what I understand presently, the more exciting it is, because I get to learn everything in that space, which is totally new to me, and then try to come up with solutions that often, if I'm from the outside, I might actually be able to apply new ideas too. So yeah, my passion is just in the process, not in any specific space. If that.
No, I mean, it actually makes a lot of sense. I always say that entrepreneurship is really more about exploration. It's like we're journeying inward and discovering things about the mind and reality that we didn't necessarily understand before. And the kind of person who I feel is a great entrepreneur is somebody who loves that journey more than the outcome or any particular facet of it.
Right.
It's kind of like Lewis and Clark. They weren't like, oh man, I really love Oregon. It was, or they may have said that, but they just love to explore.
Right.
Shackleton loved to explore. He got him, stuck on an iceberg. But I think that makes a ton of sense. I think it's a really great way of thinking about things. So
yeah, it's it's a fun way I think to approach life in general, or it's something a fun way that I like to approach life. Just because ultimately I just think that there are all of these different realities happening at the same time. I think we talked about that briefly. Yeah,
let's talk more about it.
Okay.
Let's get deep into it.
Yeah. So, there are all these different realities that are happening at the same time, in the sense of how my perception of the world is kind of, it's all of my experience from when I was a child up until now. And it's all of the experience that I have relating to society and the way that I perceive that information. And so, we've got shared realities that we've all somewhat agreed upon. The example that I always use is the streets, the road, stop signs. We all have decided that putting up a red stop sign means that when we get to it, we're going to stop. And we collectively decide together that we're going to do that because of the fact that it's going to make it safer for us to do this thing that we're all agreeing is dangerous, driving these big vehicles that can crash into each other. So, not everybody stops at a stop sign. Some people run them, and that's because you can run some stop signs. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, it doesn't actually make you stop, but we collectively have bought into the reality that we've created of this is how it works. Everybody's going to function this way. And so something as simple as a stop sign, we can all get on board pretty easily with. The majority of us will function and will, do things that way. But when you start to zoom out, things get to become different little pools of pockets of reality that exist for some people and not for everyone else. So entrepreneurship and startup land kind of fits into one of those pockets. There's a lot of appeal around it now. There's a lot of people looking at it from the outside saying like, oh, we've got a TV show now. And there's
pretty accurate though.
And there's reality television shows about it too. So it's accurate. No, it is. But from an outside person's perspective, it's not even that it's as accurate as it is entertaining and like this look into this world a reality that you're not normally participating in. And so kind of understanding that it's for me to be able to kind of jump into different spaces and, in cosmetics, for example, like I wear almost no makeup. I didn't have a ton of interest in it, but saw this space and opportunity and thought, okay, well, let me educate myself and actually see if it's a good idea. So kind of jump into it. And there's a whole world, like just going online and just like watching YouTube video after YouTube video to try to understand like this network of, nail artists and like what they've created together in this entire like fascinating reality of what they've made and what can be offered that supports that, that doesn't exist right now. And so that to me is the fun part, I think, essentially of jumping like from reality to reality, is that there's so many spaces that people have built together. So there's so many like business opportunities and ideas within those spaces based on what people actually want and need. It's just a matter for me of like just going and participating in them.
So how do you think those realities get created? Is it a leader or an entrepreneur or somebody who comes in and creates those? And is it like a conscious creation? Like, does somebody sit down and say, I need to be able to, do X. So they form a reality and sell people on joining into that reality. How do you think that?
I think it's the opposite with successful things. I think the most successful businesses have come from finding, there's this space and there's this little pocket right here of something that isn't happening that we can fill that, and everything comes down to human emotion, right? And so it's essentially all of these feelings that we're trying to solve for, or experiences that we're trying to solve for, and whatever products or businesses and tools that we create, if it solves some sort of dilemma in somebody's existence and like their human experience with it, then I think that you have an opportunity to make a successful business in that space. But I don't think that it happens the other way around. I don't think as frequently it's, oh, here's my great idea that only I see as a thing that should exist in the world. Everybody come over to my side and now participate with me. It's more of, there's all of these everybody is an insanely creative person, even if they don't think they are. Like, their mind is continuously creating their reality and functioning with the world around them. And so when people start to make things together, like just using nail art as an example, I believe in the 80s, maybe even earlier, in different communities, women were starting to do nail art with each other. And that was almost like, it was a form of expression that was unique to them. And since then, if you watch how it's trickled out and how it went mainstream in like 2010 to 12, and then 2013, and then now it's gone backwards again. Like you're seeing like the effect of people kind of creating this space, and then businesses are coming out of those spaces, but they aren't starting necessarily before people have a desire or want for these things.
And, do you think the want is it like an organic thing that just kind of occurs within communities of people? Like, I'm just trying to like think about like how that thing comes, how that comes along, and I don't know the answer. I'm just, saying like maybe we should think about that. Like how does that, what does that look like? Is it that, the other realities kind of bump up against, something and it kind of create a new pocket? Is it, a group of people who think a specific way? Is it, modification of existing realities and people kind of like defecting from those realities to create a new one?
Right. Yeah, it might be all of those things at the same exact time, right?
Yeah.
Like it just depends on sort of like what it is and that's being created or thought of. I don't think that any idea is by itself super unique, because there's already, a million other people thinking about the same thing you're thinking about at any given time. It's just the way that it's executed and the way that it's presented and the timing of how it's pushed into like whatever world that it's pushed into. That's what all of those factors come into play. But, I don't know, with physical product creation, for example, of just like the nail wraps, because I'll just keep going back to that as an example for now. For the space that I came up with working on those was from this already exists, but in the wrong way. And it's targeting this other audience and not hitting this huge space of where the nail art world really is. So nail wraps existed. They were sold in CVS, but the designs were made for young girls, 13-year-olds. Like the patterns that were on them were not the styles or the creativity that was coming out of the nail art industry, and that community and that reality. And so I said, oh, well, this could be a tool for them to use, and would they be interested? And there are these amazing nail artists that are creating these designs, and they, to get your nails painted by someone like Brittany Tokyo, who was one of our nail artists that designed nail wraps, it'd be like $300 a session. And so there's lots of people all over the country that follow her on Instagram that love her work but don't have the opportunity to actually experience it with her. And this is like a way for her artwork to spread further than she physically would be able to do on her own. And so it's almost just like a combining of realities and things that exist already in a specific order to make it, make some sort of new product now that is something that is actually desirable by that community.
That's awesome. And then, so how do you come up with these mashups? How do you like think through this? I mean, you kind of talked about how you kind of just like saw some angles and, is there like a, lightning strike moment for you, or is it like an evolution where you kind of start to pull, a thread and then, next thing you know, you're like at some big opportunity or whatever.
Yeah.
How does that work for you?
I think that it has to do with listening. Just to pull back even further, it has to do with trying to be conscious and pay attention to everything that's happening around me and in other people's worlds and listening. A lot of times the biggest issue of kind of being stuck in your own one space in reality is that you aren't actually understanding what other people are doing, wanting to see in the world, creating themselves. Because if you're too focused in your little pocket or of your world, you're not participating in all these other spaces that really exist. And that's actually something that I've thought about a lot as an approach, the way that I need to think about any industry and any business that I might start in the future. Instead of coming in as this, I'm a tech person that's from startup land and I'm going to come and solve all the problems of this industry because it's, I can disrupt this industry if I come in with my tech. Instead of thinking about it that way, and thinking about it from this perspective of the way that a startup even works, right? So it's, I come up with this great idea, I pitch it, I raise money for it, I take that money and I build it, and I have to continuously prove how it's going to grow into this massive, $1 billion plus. It's past $1 billion now. What is it? It's a $1 trillion exit unicorn.
Billion's not enough.
A rainbow unicorn or whatever we're calling it now. If I'm thinking that way, and if that's what I'm trying to do, I'm playing that game, and I'm not actually playing or participating in the game or the reality of the company that I could be creating that actually solves the solutions within the space. So sometimes that works, that model and method could work, kind of blindly, just like charging forward with a good idea, because if it's good enough and the timing's right and everything kind of aligns, you can make it there, but a lot of times I think the core of making good businesses, if we stopped focusing so much on it having to work that way, there's all these other solutions and new ideas that can come up and new ways of even funding things and that don't have to follow that one track, right? And essentially there's the possibility of building small businesses that make a lot of sense and that can be run that way. And, there's all of these old, and they're not even old, but like older business growth methods and things that we're just not even participating in necessarily as much when we are focused too much on venture capital and we're focused too much on growth in this way and seeing everything kind of follow the path that we think it needs to be successful.
And then how much of that, those realities, where do you think that stuff comes from? Those ideas and those, the current zeitgeist when it comes to company building.
It's all kind of just like a bubble effect of when you get in and you're part of a club and you're part of the space that you're participating in. And sort of everybody's telling each other this is what, we're getting feedback and we're growing from each other. And so if we're only interacting with each other and just in, this group of people that we're kind of, participating in, I think that the way that we perceive the world is kind of, we've filters based on that information. Versus if we kind of expand who we're spending our time with, where we're spending our time, we start to disconnect from being in just one space in one bubble, and we can start to see the different worlds that are existing at the same time for everyone.
Yeah, it almost sounds like we should be actively trying to do that based on what you're saying, because if we're not, then we could have a tendency to get trapped into what's working for our current reality. Whereas what you're saying is what's more important is finding a pocket out there and then being able to service that, that group of people in the way they see the world. Right.
Right.
And you can't do that if you're thinking in terms of venture funding, content marketing,
If you even think of it like it's a startup, right? Once we start to label and we think, and if you're already inside of this world, I mean, there's so many creative, talented, smart, capable entrepreneurs that are participating and pushing in like this startup space that are so focused on learning what do you have to do to have a successful startup? What do I have to do to raise venture capital? What are the things that I have to do this? And the energy and focus drives towards having a successful startup versus, which could map correctly, but it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, so there's a lot of really capable people that if you were to take them kind of out of that mindset and say, you know what, let me just take you over here. You're interested in this area, or this is what you want to start. Okay, well, let's take you away from that world for a second, startup world, and let's put you into like the formal side of it even, and you can see the flaws in that. And now let's take you out of the formal side of it. Like, let's say it's education. Education has so much red tape, and there's so many elements of it that are difficult. So we have all of the potential in the world to, with these people that are creative, have energy, that want to drive change. We have so much potential in these people to totally, improve education. But if you're trying to improve education from over here, and you aren't, and just startup focused, you won't necessarily do a better job than the people that are in, red tape education land, that are focused on the limitations potentially that they have, that they understand, right? Mm-hmm. But you might be able to do a much, much better job of actually solving real problems that exist in education if you don't stay in one bubble, if you don't stay focused and surrounding yourself with people that are in either startup or red tape education land, right? And you kind of go to all of these different experiences. You put yourself in the actual space for a while. You go and actually stay. You learn everything that you can from actual teachers. And I know that a lot of good entrepreneurs do this to a degree, but I'm just saying, if we can remove ourselves from the bubble a little bit more, and change our expectation of what's the end goal too. If we're all driving for the fame, and we're all driving for these billion-dollar unicorn, trillion-dollar unicorn exits, we're not really looking to improve or change anything necessarily, right? We're playing that game. We're signing up to play startup game. If you are actually motivated to make change, you don't necessarily have to participate in that game to do it.
And it's really funny, because if you talk to, I think, most entrepreneurs who are, active in the community, even, successful ones, they will talk in terms of change, right?
Yeah.
How they're trying to create change and change the world and all these things. My belief that a lot of that is just kind of like, rhetoric that's designed to change people's perception of whatever they're working on, and make people think, think on a larger level, right. Which I guess has its place. But one of the things that I always struggle with is like, how do you operate within that construct if you need to, right?
Right.
And maybe that's something that we could talk a little bit about is, how do you, if the current game is that venture game, but you see a different, world, and you see how, maybe that's flawed or whatever, how do you operate, in that game, where you maybe don't, maybe right. You play your own game, right? I mean, how does that work, do you think?
Well, it depends on ultimately the goals and what you actually need to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, right? So if you see over here in this world, say it's education again, you want to change something in education, you need funding, right? So then you think, okay, in order to change this, I need funding because I'm trying to change it at this massive scale. So therefore, I need to either go through grant money, I need to become a nonprofit, or I need to go towards VC and turn this into, show them how this is a business that can, exit at this, or the business that can grow to this scale. What ends up happening is you focus so much on this bigger picture of what something needs to be in order for you to make effective change. So if your goal is ultimately to make effective, big sweeping change in education, the best way to actually do that is to start by all of the little steps that it takes to do it. And it doesn't necessarily cost, or it doesn't necessarily need to have a huge, you don't need to raise a lot of money necessarily to get going, to really find the thing that's going to solve the initial first problem. And there are a lot of good businesses that can come out of focusing on the smaller issues, where if you build something successful that solves this first part, you may not need to raise, $3-4 million to do that. You can probably hop in there and get things done for a lot less. And essentially, if you're, focused on educating yourself so that you're capable of solving that, if it's tech, then make sure you know how to code and design, make sure you know how to build a successful product. Focus on yourself so that you can then implement your own capabilities in that space. And you can build a small business that makes enough money for you to be able to keep pushing forward. Once you find the thing, because now you're in it and you understand it, once you find the thing that you really see opportunity to change, you don't have to go chase after venture capital money. You just have to find the person that maps with that appropriately. So who is interested in the space? Who is the person that can help this move forward? And it's like little baby steps at a time, versus thinking that I'm going to disrupt education and I need to raise $4 million right now in order to do that.
Yeah, I think, actually, we talked about this kind of offline, but to kind of go along with that, just thinking about like how the election played out, right? Yeah. Where Trump didn't spend nearly as much as his competitors spent, and was still able to be successful, I think, as a result of executing well along kind of what you're talking about, like right. Small steps within his reality, his concept of reality, which, is what it is. But, a lot of people share that reality with them, and we're willing to jump on board and take that ride, Right. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know. We talked about the election and reality and fake news and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'd love to kind of just hear a thought about what fake news is and those kind of things.
Oh yeah, no, the concept of fake news is fascinating, because in part I actually think that what Donald Trump is trying to express, and I'm most definitely not on the guy's side, but just to explain the idea.
Got to put that out there.
Yeah, I just want to throw that out there. I have no association, no excitement around it. Pretty scared, actually. It's going to be fun. Fake news, essentially, what he's trying to say is that the way that everything is being, like the way that it's being spun and the way that people are reporting it is with bias and with their own intention, which is kind of true across the board, because when you try to put any information out that's not biased, you're forgetting the fact that every single person is human and we're expressing all of these ideas the best we can, across the board. But in order to write, to put out news that's just completely not, like non-biased, is almost impossible. So when he's saying fake news, he's doing, as he always does, a terrible job of actually, I think, expressing what he's intending. And they're grabbing that and using it beautifully back against him for everyone else, because everyone else is, essentially participating in that and saying like, oh no, this is not fake news. Clearly he's crazy, or clearly he, he's just out of it. He doesn't understand the world and the way that it is. But fake news in general is kind of a funny thing, because we are definitely in a really interesting time when it comes to information. The internet is something that, I'm so grateful that we have the internet, obviously, but what that's done for the country and for the world as far as connecting us and bringing ideas forward, has been huge. But what it's also done is open up reality to the point of what is true anymore, what is real, what is fact at this point.
and what is it? Like,
what is it?
It's like, at that point, like, ideally fact is something that's objective that most people agree on, but if most people agree something that is false is true,
it doesn't necessarily.
Does that mean it is? It's kind of a weird thing. And sometimes I kind of go back and forth and oscillate on just thinking in terms of that. Like if the whole world, at one point everybody thought the world was flat.
Right.
Did that mean the world was flat? I mean, it wasn't objectively, but within the entire mental construct of everything, it did, right? Yeah. So what's really truth if truth is something that can change over time? Like the way we understand reality now, right, or even in these little micro pockets of reality, the way people understand their reality could be fundamentally flawed, just because they don't have the tools or instruments to measure those things or whatever they may be.
And so, I think inherently all of it is because we are making this up together. So there's no one thing. And we kind of collectively, humanity has been always somewhat heading in the direction while simultaneously heading in the opposite direction. So we have this one direction of, oh no, humans, we're loving and we have certain morals that we would stand up to. And religion, I think, did a great job of actually helping guide humans with a set of morals that we could structure and follow for a long time, right? So being able to say, okay, well, murder is bad. Okay, we've collectively, the world has decided this concept of murder is bad, but there are some times that we've all agreed that murder is okay. Yep. So we've collectively said in war, we're murdering for. It's not murder. It's we're fighting. It's war. We're fighting. Right. Yeah. So it's enemy. But the reality is we're all humans. We're killing each other. But we're not allowed to kill each other in so many different situations. But in this situation, not only were we allowed to do it, but we're going to fund it with our taxpayers' money, regardless of whether you want to or not. Right. So all of these realities have always been, the way the world works has always been a collective agreement of everybody kind of staying on the same page. And yeah, we've gone off. We're in different pages, but everyone relatively trying to stay on the same page as what does it mean to be alive? What are we doing here? And how do you be a human? Like, right? How do I function as a human in my day-to-day life? So now, because of the fact that we have so much more, we have the ability to connect to people on our computers and on our technology at this point so quickly. We have the ability to share different viewpoints. Individual people can share their view in a way that they never used to be able to. It starts to get a little bit messier because when you used to hear from the top down collectively, this is what America means, everyone kind of thought that must be what everybody thinks America is, right? So we see it and we say, okay, I'm an American, that means I'm this, this, and this is how I'm going to function, right? Like we actually did a really great job, I think, of building up structure in society. We said, okay, here's what you do. You go through school. After school, you get married. You buy a house with a white picket fence. You have 2.5 children. You work a good, decent job. You feel satisfied that you did that. Then you retire. Right? We had a path. And then if you wanted to, you also had the opportunity to rebel as much as you wanted to. So you could say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get married and have kids. I'm going to go rebel against this. But in order to even have the opportunity to rebel, you need some kind of structure. So we had this beautiful kind of structure to give to everybody. So if you want to stay in it, you have it. It's safe. You can do this. This is what life means. If you want to rebel against it, you have something to counter. It's like a binary decision. It's easy to understand. I'm rebelling against that. That means anything. I can do anything, but I'm not doing that. And
so you're still on a path, even if you're rebelling.
Oh, of course. Yeah. You're just on the rebellion path, right? And as a society, we were able to relatively keep structure, and then along comes the internet and the ability to see all of these different, like, smaller realities that people are participating in. So a kid in the middle of the country now can go online and watch a video of somebody dancing halfway across the world, a dance that he's never seen, and he can go, I want to be a dancer. And he can be in a small town where that would have never, ever been a thing that would come into his mind as a participation in reality he can be in. He would just think, I'm going to do the things that we do in this town, right? Maybe I'll move away from this town or travel, but for the most part, this is what the world is, this is what America is, and this is who we are as humans. And so we've started to lose structure because the individual voice is starting to get, louder. And I think that has a lot to do with why Trump is even president. There's all these different realities that are happening, and some of us are just like, oh, how could that have even happened? Well, there's a whole chunk of the country that thinks a specific way that still exists, and even though we were not representing them or showing them, they're there, and they're able to kind of show that voice now, unfortunately.
So what do you think that means for the future, in a world where automation is starting to, rear its ugly head or beautiful head, depending on which side of the ownership spectrum you stand on with regard to the automation, and like this kind of fractured and fragmented world of multiple realities, where no single track is the clear, one track that you should follow. The American dream now is a massive pile of different thoughts and ideas. How does one navigate that? And in the future, are people going to grow up without direction because they don't don't have work like they used to because they're getting some kind of government subsidy or something? What do you think the future looks like?
Yeah.
If this continues.
Right. I think it's definitely going to be interesting and complicated. What I think happens is with each generation, when they raise their children, they teach them essentially up to where they are, what they received, what they've learned up to that point. And they try to say, okay, this is your starting point, essentially. And that next generation takes it a little further. So like my parents' generation, they raised my generation with the idea that we can be anything we want, right? So we were given this kind of open door. And so now a lot of us are struggling with, well, what do we do if we can be anything we want? Mm-hmm. My mom had the option of being a secretary, a flight attendant, or a teacher. And she did two of those in her life. She was a flight attendant and a teacher. And that was just from when she graduated college. That's kind of the direction they had her in, right? So now we can be anything we want. So we have that open opportunity. What's gonna happen in the future depends on what we teach our children, what the world means, what they can do, what opportunities are available to them. And then when it comes to the automation side of things, what we have to do, I think, and what's really important for people to be focusing and working on is finding solutions for our economy that are not based on the current way we function with jobs, because they don't exist. They don't exist now. In 10 years, our programmers are programming themselves out of jobs themselves. So there's always going to be new things to work on, but the majority of people will not have to work. They already don't have to work if we just built a better system. The trickiest thing, though, is, like I was saying before with the binary, the decisions, is in order to see what could be a better option now than where we are, we kind of had to play through what we've done, right? So it's a matter of what do we do next? Like, how do we implement moving forward? Can we work on restructuring our economy to actually be based on like resources and not depleting our planet? Or what is it what do we focus on? Do companies in the future, instead of saying, well, next year or by this quarter we have to make this much more money, what if everybody kind of caps out at a certain amount of money that they make, and they say, all right, now, this is me dreaming, obviously. But okay, after this amount of money, then it's who can actually do better for the world. And we're racing towards companies making a specific amount of money and then being able to go to these next levels. And we idealize companies that are capable of converting, the energy that they use into being completely, like solar energy or something, whatever, right? So it's like, we have to shift the way that we are focused. Money is absolutely not valuable at the end of the day, because we're all going to die. What is valuable is time and life, and we are losing time because we're destroying the planet and we're killing each other.
That's actually interesting. I think, so you mentioned that there are some companies who are kind of trying to transcend profit. It's almost like, it sounds like the typical corporate archetype is profit. Like,
Right.
you make a company to be profitable and to generate value and drive value for shareholders, right? But then it's weird, and it's funny. I always talk about Elon Musk, but I kind of feel like we idolize, at least in the tech community, we idolize his businesses because they're about something larger, or maybe that's his way of generating profit. There's no way to know what's actually swimming around
Right.
in the head there, and whatever. But I think he's been extremely successful at kind of pushing us to like think at that next level. With Tesla, electric cars. Nobody really gave a shit about electric cars until
Right.
Tesla came along, and made them something again. They were like something back in the 80s and early 90s, and then it was kind of like, okay, that's not possible, etc. Solar City is another thing where it's kind of like, oh, solar, we have this nuclear reactor in the sky, but it's too expensive and the panels are inefficient. So he came up with some way of making that work. And then, he's obviously launching rockets into space as well. So, he's really kind of helping, like forcing us to think at that next level. And my question for you is, are there things that entrepreneurs can do to frame and shape their businesses with that kind of mission, do you think?
Oh yeah, it's super popular and sexy right now. So even if you didn't even intend to really do all of it, like it's still, I think that we're doing a good job collectively of shifting towards that as a priority. We're spreading that message that we actually need new businesses and we need large companies that are actually going to focus on these things and these priorities, and we can see that in our advertisements, like with that terrible Pepsi.
Oh man, that Pepsi ad! Wow.
That Pepsi ad. Their intention is something that they think is positive, mapping themselves and the idea to this thing that they see. Right? They absolutely failed at it. And also, you can't take actual. You can't take that and convert that into an ad. You just can't. You're cheapening it massively, and you're destroying the purpose of it. But the fact that they even thought about that as an idea shows that they understand that this younger generation and everybody where we are now, we need to head in that direction. So they're trying to participate in it the worst way possible, but they're conscious of it. They're not there yet. Like, those companies aren't there yet. They're not going to change. They haven't changed the way that they're structuring things, but they're aware, which is the first step. And I think the younger generations and the companies that come from younger generations are going to be pushing us in that direction.
But how much of that do you think is marketing versus, and this is maybe just cynical Jimmy talking, but how much of that you think is marketing versus, like true need and want to like try to transcend,
100% marketing. It's 100%. There's nothing about that was Pepsi trying to transcend and grow, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that they are conscious of the fact that, we should market to, we see this, right? It's the first step. It's just consciousness is the first step. So they're not aware that it's where they should go yet or what they should be doing genuinely, and they're not there. And I honestly think a lot of it has to do with older people dying and younger people moving up in power. I really think that the world changes, and I think we're heading in a positive direction because every new generation is that much faster and quicker because of the resources and the education that their parents' generation were able to give to them. We really don't all need to be working in the future. And what has to happen is the people that are capable of creating new things need to give space for everybody to come up with them. And that's something we're not doing very well right now. But I think the younger generation is more conscious of that and inclusive.
You think that's is it like a moral choice that people make, or is it something like almost out of self-interest that they realize that, in the future, people will realize they need other people to buy their stuff. Therefore, they need to make sure other people are around, kind of thing.
Right. I think pretty much everything is self-interest, but I don't think that necessarily is bad. I think the way that humans work as a core is from that space. But instead of looking at it or assuming that that means that people are evil and selfish, and using the word selfish in a bad way, if we think of it from the sense of, if I am doing this for myself, it most likely will benefit other people because I'm doing this thing to improve my life, and there's other people's lives that will be improved along with that. So the issue a lot of times is when you think that you're doing something for other people and you're creating this this space where you're like, oh, I'm contributing to the world and I'm doing this for other people. You're kind of denying the selfishness, the selfish factor of why you're doing the things you're doing. But I think if we can get over the idea that being selfish is bad as a starting point, what we recognize is what I do that makes me happy will contribute more to the world than if I'm doing things that don't. And that's, if everybody's functioning that way, then we can, right? Because there are people that want to build technology that helps, that improves our hospitals, our education system, like, because they genuinely are passionate and interested. And if we don't have those people focused in those areas, or we don't give them the ability to do what they really, are driven to do, then we maybe have that person doing a 9-to-5, working in something that they're making a lot of money doing, but not really passionate about. Mm-hmm. And so for selfish reasons, for the whole world, for selfish reasons, we should have people working on and focusing on the things that they really like. And there's always the argument that, okay, so if not everybody has to work a 9-to-5 concept, right? Won't a ton of people just sit around and play video games all day? Right, that's the question. Maybe. And my thought is, why not let them? Why not just because there will still be people in this world that are driven to create things that solve the problems for everyone else. And as long as we're not creating the space where we have this stepping on each other to get up, and there's no getting up, there's just reward in being the person that you want to be and accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish and resources to do that. I think that there is the potential to take care of the whole planet. I mean, we already have enough food to feed everyone, and we don't.
I mean, it's actually interesting what you said there. I'm going to maybe rephrase it and screw it up. And if it's wrong, let me know. But it's almost like you're saying that, in a world where automation becomes more interesting more the norm, and more people or less people have to actually work because, we'll have systems and computers to do pretty much everything. More people will be free to work on the things that they like. So It's almost like that guy who's working the corporate 9-to-5, like you said, that was miserable and hated his job, but, just had to do it because you had to pay for that mortgage and stuff like that. It's like the automation will unlock that person to now do something really spectacular and special. And there will be, maybe the other 5 people will play video games and watch ESPN all day, but that one guy may create the next, whatever that thing may be, which is really interesting.
I still think that people will make ESPN and people will make, even if they don't have to, because the people that create the best things that we have are doing it from a space of just desire and passion to create. And I think there are a lot of people that are untapped potential, that are capable of that are just don't have the ability, the resources, didn't come from the background, right? A lot of it comes from, where did you start? Yes, you can start kind of lower than someone else in the sense of financially, your family. You can start with more challenging, more challenges up front, right? If you're not, for example, a white male that came from a wealthy family, we take everybody else and we put them all on different levels of difficult starting points, right? Yes, you can come from wherever and come up and work really hard to get to a certain place, but the reality is that it's a lot longer of a road and a lot harder of a path because you have a lot more discrimination. You have a lot working against you, and you have a lot of an element of luck that has to play into a lot of things. But if you are born into a situation where you have the network almost automatically, your dad's friends invest in your first company like it's nothing because they have the ability to do that. you can start a company when you're a kid. You're like a teenager and you start your first thing, right? And you're just even aware that that's a possibility, that what your passion is, what the thing you are interested in can convert and turn into something that you put into the world, right? There's so many people that don't have that potential because they are learning that the world is the reality that they're in, and what they learn from that space is that the world is hard and that making money is difficult, and that people will be racist or sexist and all of these things, which they will be. It will happen because that reality exists, and it's an unfortunate space that we're still functioning in. But if you take that same kid and you take that kid out of those circumstances, you can't necessarily say, okay, well, you're not going to be a girl anymore. You go be a white male now and, from a wealthy family. You can't change all of the circumstances. But if you even take that same child and you put that child in an environment that gives that child more resources from the beginning, better education, money to fund whatever it is that they're working on to grow through, right? If they have that at least at minimum those same situations, the potential of that kid to be able to create things is so much higher. And in the future, I don't think we have jobs. I think we need creators.
It's interesting. I mean, it's something we almost even see, like, in a way now, right? Like in the, like the artisanal, like bread and, like that kind of stuff. Like, how is it that there's a guy in Brooklyn who makes like, special cheese in his, his basement or something? It's such a weird concept when, you go to the supermarket, you get Sargento cheese and it's like, it'd be, 30% cheaper than this guy's cheese, Right. So, I mean, it kind of exists now where things are more bespoke and more creative and more oriented towards those like packets of reality that you talked about. Okay, cool. So I just want to shift gears for a second and just ask you, like, what, do you have a favorite book or anything?
Favorite book? I can say right now I have a favorite app that I'm using to get information from books faster than reading them.
Wow, what is this?
There's an app, I think they're in Germany, called Blinkist. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they sum up books into what they call blinks instead of chapters. So they'll take the chapter and the most important kind of paragraph of information that you get from that chapter, sum it up and put these all together. So on my drive, to Playa Vista, I can listen to 2 books.
It's audio too?
Yeah, it's audio. Wow. And then it's beautiful. It's such a fun idea. After a while, you start to recognize, wow, all of these, entrepreneur books, all of these, self-help books or whatever, like, or all these like specific like tech or whatever industry you're in, like all these books actually are saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
When you get them in such a bite-size, amount, you're actually able to compare. I'll go through like 30 books and go, wow, okay, so what did I really get from all of these? Like, okay, this part I like, this part I like.
Yeah. It's like you got to be like like the old gold river gold sifter guys, where you're like, that's kind of what reading I feel like is. You end up like just having to like sift through to try to find those nuggets of gold, and unfortunately you have to like sift through a 200-page book. So that's really interesting that those guys exist.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm enjoying it, and I've taken a little break in the last week because I was like, okay, I think I've gone through enough. I'm gonna wait till they add some more, but they're constantly adding new books to it.
Is it like a monthly?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago?
Nothing.
Nothing at all?
No.
If you go back to
I don't think 10 years ago even really exists. I know that sounds crazy. Let me explain a little bit. Where I was 10 years ago versus now is not a place that I think that there's any information that I have now is worth bringing back. I mean, I could say like, what was it? When was it that Warren Buffett did like I'll give you $1 billion or something if you guess what the March Madness, or he did some kind of bet
I didn't hear about this.
Oh yeah, this was a while ago. I can't remember when it happened exactly. He did some kind of bet if you guessed the brackets perfectly, that he'd give you some large amount of money.
That are just like,
and so that's kind of like a silly answer that I'd say. I was like, cool. I would say I want to know what the outcome is, and then let me hop back and be ready to tell myself, because that'd be cool to just have that much money for no reason. But no, I don't. I don't really think that I'd take anything back, because I think that the present moment is the only thing that I have that really exists. The past is a collection of my memories of little bits of it, but it's almost impossible for me to even say, like, let me take this knowledge back to that moment, because I'm not the same person that I was. I'm continuously growing in every moment that I'm in.
So you're saying basically like the information almost would be useless to you back then, because it only helps you within the context of right now, which is really interesting, and that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, like, have you? And this is such a silly way of explaining it, but like, have you ever listened to a love song before? Have you ever been heartbroken?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. So have you listened to a love song before you ever experienced heartbreak and thought, oh, this is sad, this is cute, I like this song. Yeah. And then after you hear that song or other songs that are about heartbreak, and you feel it so much differently, like you understand it. Or, someone tells you a quote or says something to you, and you're like, oh yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying. And then later in life, you're like, oh, that's what that means.
Yeah, you need that. You need the context to truly understand. It's true, actually.
You tell your 10 years ago, you tell yourself anything, and it doesn't necessarily translate. Now, if I can take who I am right now and rewind 10 years and just be exactly the same person, I would do that in a heartbeat. That'd be fun. But, I mean, I can pretty much do that right now anyway. I'm going to pretend it's 10 years ago. It doesn't make a difference. It's just now.
Okay, cool. And then how can people find you online, or, how people can keep track of you? Or do you want them to?
Yeah, sure. All of my handles pretty much everywhere is just CL Kent.
Okay. Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff.
Yeah,
cool.
Across the board. And then Scratch is Go Scratch It.
Cool.
Go Scratch It.
Go Scratch It.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you for talking with us today.
That was fun.
Appreciate it.
Sweet.